getting all this chance of,
Well, look at it like this: the processing plant that it goes through, maybe they need to cut costs. They need to make more money, so they cut corners and they're not cleaning it properly. They skip a couple stages of the cleaning process, and that's all it would take. And they cut costs. They're making more money, but guess what? Now people is doing like you're doing, spending all day in the bathroom if they're not dying.
Oh yeah, it's really scary. Again, Thanksgiving is coming. Now, I was reading about make sure you cook your turkey a little bit more than what they recommend. If recommended so much hours and per pound, add an extra half an hour on it or extra 20 minutes. I'd rather have it a little dry than get sick. And again, they're saying don't wash your chicken, don't wash your turkey before you cook it. But you know what? I always learned from my grandmother when I was a kid. I used to watch her, cook their big meals when I was a little kid and we have our family get-togethers. They would always take the turkey or the chickens and whatever, they'd wash them, underneath this, not with soap. They would wash them and rinse them off really good. Soap it might get rid of some stuff. But anyway, they would wash it really good and then cook it. And they're saying don't do that because there's more chance of, getting sick. I don't know how you could. I mean, I would think if any bacteria is on the chicken, for the slime, after it's been frozen or unthawed out, the liquid, you rinse all that off and all that stuff, I would think you would, be better shape. But they're saying, nope, don't do that.
Yeah, I will give this strong piece of advice. One thing about poultry, chicken, or turkey, once it's been cooked, the longer it stays out, the bacteria in it keeps multiplying and multiplying, so you don't want to leave it out too long after it's been cooked. That's just a word of the wise. Yeah. That much I do.
Otherwise, you'll be going to the restroom quite often. Another thing, after you mentioned about the worms and pork and all that stuff, well, what did my wife make last night? She cooked a pork roast, and then after the show, they bring it to me and say, here's your dinner. We warmed it up. And I started eating it till I noticed some parts of it was pink. And when I saw the pink part, I go, I'm not eating any more of this. This is it. I know. I mean, you have me psyched all out. And then reading that article on the news where, the guy's brain and the whole inside of him is all, tapeworms and worms because of eating pork. It was undercooked.
Yeah, and if you ever want to do an experiment, just take a piece of pork, like I told you, submerge it in some Coca-Cola and let it sit. You'll see what comes out of it.
I don't want to try that. Don't go, not before Thanksgiving, a couple days before. Come on. I bet you could take a lot of different meat and do the same thing. And, if you pour Coke or Pepsi with it, you'd be surprised. And actually, you know what? I was watching a thing on YouTube. If you want to pour on meat, just don't use Coke. Take a mixture of Coke and a little bit of Pepsi and mix it together. Then you won't want to eat anymore whatever you put that on. Just to let you know. Because it does some weird stuff. And, you talk about worms that come out. Okay, well, there you go. So anyway, you're talking about this place, that they built a school over all these graves and stuff like that. I remember back here 20 years ago, near Seattle, they were putting a mall in, a big mall. And when they were bulldozing it, they were finding, skeletons. And at first, it was on the news. I figured, we have a serial killer that was killing people, and burying their bodies out in the field. Well, it turned out that field was a cemetery back around the 1880s, 1870s, 1890s, maybe, whatever. And then for like the last 50, 60 years, it wasn't, the gravestones were removed. They probably the same thing. They hired some company, right, to change out the property. In other words, by changing out is they go through and exhume the bodies and take them and rebury them in another cemetery. Well, evidently, whatever happened there is they removed the gravestones, but left the bodies. So when they got there with their big bulldozers, years later and all that stuff and started leveling the ground and digging into it like, they do to make them all these bones started coming up. Well, yeah, it was a cemetery there at one time.
Yeah, that's been happening throughout history. I remember all kind of reports like that. It's, again, it revolves around money. People want to cut costs. They figure, nobody will know. We'll just, move the headstones. And sometimes they don't even do that. And I do remember about almost 20 years ago in Dayton, Ohio, there was a funeral home. And for about 20 years, the guy, he was not doing the bodies properly. He wasn't burying them. He was just had them hidden in the walls and stuff, and was selling people stuff that they weren't getting. He was cutting all kind of corners, but he finally got caught. Well, he went to jail. That was a big thing. And that just goes to show you. And then even where I live, there's cemeteries underneath these lakes, because back in the Depression, when they had all this water management, and they built all these dams here during the Depression to create jobs and stuff, and they made all these lakes. And when they did that, of course, there was a lot of towns down in the valleys back in the in the 30s when they made these. So they didn't even move the cemeteries or the people. So there's graves, whole cemeteries underneath hundreds of foot of water and under these lakes around here, which is kind of bizarre.
Yeah, that's scary, because what diseases could have been contaminated in those lakes at one point? But a lot of it's dishonesty. They'll. I'm not saying. What I was reading too is like what they would do is basically remove some of the bodies and then remove the headstones. Now, I'm not talking of up in Seattle, but this is the routine of these dishonest people that contractors and whatever. Because you know how much money it would cost to exhume a body and then rebury it? A lot.
Yeah, times 1,000. That's a lot. Yeah.
And you have to buy other property. You have to build a vault around it to drop the coffin in. A lot of expense to do that. So if somebody buys the property, and I don't even know how they can buy the property. It was a cemetery in the first place, so I don't know how that goes on. But think about it, to relocate all those bodies, and the cost factor is they probably remove some of the bodies, remove all the tombstones, and then bulldoze it and say, yeah, it's all done.
Right. Well, look at the case my buddy Mark was on. He was on your show, and he was on my show before, and where they did that case where the house, it was pretty much the same scenario. They were supposed to move the cemetery and the bodies, but they didn't. And they built a couple houses on top of the cemetery, and that caused a lot of problems in that house, because they were on. Remember, he was talking about how they found the graves. It was on the land, and the house was on top of it, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, and then they go out the backyard, right off the deck, not their deck, but their porch and the back of their house, and there was bodies there. I mean, if you're talking about having a house that's got some activity going, there's one. It's a lot, because you're living over all these, dead people. And I just don't think that's right. I think when you're dead, right, you buy the property that you're buried on for forever. I don't think that's happening. I always asked my mom when I was a little kid, we'd go past like one of the biggest cemeteries in the Seattle area. And I go, how come the thing never fills up? Why doesn't the cemetery fill up? Eventually we're going to have to bury people like they do in Japan.
Oh, yeah, on top of each other.
No, they bury them standing up. Standing up,
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Another perfect example, the movie Poltergeist. Remember at the end? They built all of them brand new houses because of real estate, because of money. They think, oh, nobody will know. They built on all that giant cemetery and any burial ground, and at the end, they're in the swimming pool, all them skeletons popping up on them and stuff. It's going to end bad either way.
Yeah, I don't know. It's called greed. And there's, unfortunately, I don't care what it is, people are greedy. It's simple. I mean, when I was a young kid, right out of, when I got out of the military, I got a job with an acquaintance of mine who built business parks, businesses where, they have little shops and stuff like that. He'd build up these little business parks. And, I was working for him for a few days, and then I noticed that, hey, this is strange. As soon as the building inspector would come, before you put the sheetrock up, he would say to the people, knock out this one, knock out this one, knock out this one, knock out this one, and then put the sheetrock up. And you know why? The one he knocked out there and knocked out there, knocked out there could go into the next unit he's building behind. You know, so then when that gets inspected, then you take that extra ones, you know, and knock that one out. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's right. They cut costs. I remember they used to build houses around here and half, like split levels, half would be brick. Well, they would tell the owners, you know, almost half the order that they're going to need twice as many bricks as they should have. And what they would do, the extra bricks, they would carry over to the next job and so on and so on. So that's extra money they're putting in their pocket. You know what I'm saying? And they were skimming people like that. It's rotten, but it's all about greed. You're right.
Oh, just like I had a friend years ago that bought a new house, and he paid to have it extra insulated, right? And he was in this house for a couple years, and he was having cracks appear. So, you know, the contractor had like a lifetime warranty. Eventually, they would come out and put spackle in and fix the crack, and then a month later, too, the crack would come up. So he got tired of it, and he hired another, you know, contractor to come out and fix some of the issues. They tore off some of the plasterboard, and you know what they found what the insulation was?
Oh, Lord, tell me.
Newspaper shredded up. You know, thousands of newspapers shredded up, and that was blowing in between the wall and that. Now, what type of paper? Just plain paper?
Yeah, that's called really cutting costs right there. Let me tell you. Wow. Yeah, and unfortunately, that stuff goes on all the time. You know, people just don't know. I've seen it. I've seen them cut costs. I've seen people, you know, houses fall apart, shouldn't be falling apart in 20 years. You know, it's because they're cutting corners and putting the money in their pocket instead of doing things the way they're supposed to. And who pays for it? The poor families that move into the house.
Yeah. Well, I told my wife when I pass, either I'm going to be cremated. If I'm not cremated, get the cheapest coffin you can get from Walmart. Not Walmart, but from Costco. Costco. I don't know. Do you have Costco's in your part of the country?
I think there's one about 30 miles north of here, yeah.
Yeah, you could get a coffin for like $500 and some bucks. Yeah, now who knows? It's not going to be one of these lifetime coffins, is it? But it's like $599. You get a coffin, you know, and then you take it and say, hey, no, I'm not going to pay $3,000 for it. I went to Costco, dude. I paid $599. That's good enough for my husband. You know?
Well, you live in a state that passed that you can turn into a plant kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I can be turned into peat moss, but I don't want to do that. Somehow I just don't think I want to be turned into peat moss.
I don't blame you, buddy.
Mulch. I don't want to be mulch.
You don't want to be mulch. You don't have a plant growing in you.
No, that's getting too bad. Or you could be made into a diamond, or you could be, you know, planted within a tree. I don't know. You know what? Hey, just better yet, cremate me. And after you have your wake, you know, and you have your, you know, little party and celebration of my death, and you're all getting drunk and saying, God, I'm glad he's gone. You just take my urine, right? And go into the bathroom and just dump my ashes down the toilet and flush it 2 or 3 times.
Oh, something tells me you're going to stick around and haunt somebody if they did that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because we got a septic system, so I know I'm going to be around for 2 years after that. Anyway, we'll be back with our show. We're going to have a great show tonight with Tobias Wayland. And who else?
Lon Stricker. You don't want to miss good cryptid stuff.
Yeah, monsters. Hairy man, like my great uncle. Anyway, we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check us out at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. And while you're on the website, kick in a buck or two for help pay for the bandwidth. Come on, you want to help us. We'll be back.
Journey, some ask themselves why the big time is passing by. They want it all and they want it now. No need to wonder how or why. They decide to make a connection with the bare from the other side. It's a self-centered new world reflection. It's a one-way